Welcome to episode number 160 of CXOTalk. I'm Michael Krigsman, and today I am speaking with Aneel Bhusri, who is the co-founder and CEO of Workday. And before I say hello to Aneel, I just want to give a shout out to Livestream, who is our streaming partner, and those guys have been great. So I just want to say thank you to Livestream for everything that you do for CXOTalk. Aneel, how are you today?
I'm great, Michael. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, Aneel, it's so great to have you here. I have been, of course, following Workday for years. I've known you for a long time, and thank you for taking the time.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure.
So, Aneel, let's start by telling us about Workday. Just give us a sense of the company, your size, your market, your revenue, and so forth.
Sure. Workday was started in 2005 with the basic idea of bringing HR and financials for large enterprises into the cloud. Back then, it was called software as a service as the model. We're a true cloud provider. We set out to serve the largest companies in the world. Today, 10 years later, we passed $1 billion in revenues. Importantly, we passed $1 billion run rate in subscription revenues. We're 5,200 employees. Very importantly, we're now over 1,100 large customers on HR, 200 customers on financials, and running at a 98% customer satisfaction level. Our customers range from some of the largest companies in the world, like HP and IBM and FedEx and Morgan Stanley and Bank of America, to mid-size, high-growth companies across the globe.
So what was the core market need that you were addressing when you and your co-founder, Dave Duffield, founded Workday?
So we, as you know, had a background at PeopleSoft, and both of us had gotten pulled back into PeopleSoft towards the tail end of that company's history. And we saw where the old legacy software model was breaking down. Upgrades were very painful, very costly. The user experience resembled nothing close to what people were experiencing in the consumer internet. And innovation really had come to a grinding halt in the world of HR and ERP. We saw an opportunity to bring a new vision to HR and finance, leveraging the cloud architecture, bringing a consumer internet style user interface into the mix, and bringing back fun and innovation to the world of enterprise applications. I give my good friend Mark Benioff a lot of credit for starting the shift in that industry. They just celebrated their 17th birthday a couple days ago. Congratulations to Mark. We saw what Mark was doing and said, hey, someone's going to do that for HR and finance. Might as well be us. And 10 years later, we're here.
So you saw that innovation had stagnated in the enterprise software market. You saw the rise of cloud. You saw what Salesforce was doing with, at that time, Salesforce automation, then to become CRM and grow beyond that. But you saw what Salesforce was doing. And so your direct, say, inspiration was to apply this new model to HR and finance. Is that correct?
That's correct. I would say it was a combination of what Salesforce was doing. And then personally, I had been involved with a venture firm that invested in Facebook and LinkedIn. And I saw firsthand how important user interface technology could be to the uptake of an application, and how important it was to have happy users. And there was no reason you couldn't bring that mindset to enterprise applications. No one had done that to the extent we did. So really from the early days, we have thought of ourselves as a consumer internet technology company from the underlying technologies we use, and we build enterprise applications on top of that. I love to use the analogy that Amazon is a very complex order management system and has a nice user interface. There's no training manual for Amazon. Why should there be a training manual for HR and finance?
So was that essentially your, shall we say, design goal to create enterprise software with the ease of use and the level of customer satisfaction that you are seeing in the consumer world?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we got off to a good start on the desktop when mobile took off with the iPhone and then ultimately the iPad and now the Android devices. That really presented a great opportunity to even take that customer experience a step further. We were very early on mobile devices. We were the first HR and finance app to be on the iPad as far as I know, and we're now on our 7th or 8th iteration of those applications, and they're phenomenal. I run Workday off of an iPad. I need to get on the desktop maybe once or twice a quarter, but I can do almost everything I need to do off of an iPad, and I think that's just a major transformation from where applications were a decade ago.
So the industry has moved quite a bit since the days of the founding of Workday. So what's happening? Where has the industry gone, and what are you seeing in the enterprise software industry today?
I think first and foremost, cloud has become mainstream. And when I say cloud, I mean true cloud. I don't mean what some of the legacy companies talk about as a hosted version of legacy software. That's not true cloud. When I talk about cloud, I mean Amazon, I mean Salesforce, I mean Google, I mean Workday. I'd add Microsoft in there, and the way Microsoft has embraced the cloud. It has become mainstream. Many of the applications now have or enjoy a cloud-first mentality. You don't hear about customers deploying CRM on-premise anymore. You see them deploying it in the cloud. Same thing happened with HR. HR passed that tipping point a couple of years ago, and now we're beginning to see that same trend in finance, where customers are taking a cloud-first mentality. The reason is these systems are far more nimble. They have a great user interface. They continue to move forward, and we're coming out with a new version every 6 months. But we make the upgrade a seamless experience, not the 1-year upgrade, tens of millions of dollars process that upgrading legacy systems used to be. And so we've left the legacy systems in the dust from a functionality and performance perspective. So now the market is defaulting to the cloud applications as not just being a better way to do things, but actually in some cases even being more functionally rich than the legacy applications. The other issue that has largely dissipated is the security one, and I think for the most part, CIOs see true cloud vendors as investing very heavily in security and understanding that most of the breaches are actually of on-premise technologies, not of cloud technologies. So security and privacy were major concerns in the early days of the cloud. I don't see those at the same point. Still important, still something that every customer should check into and make sure they're comfortable with it. But for the most part, the cloud vendors do a better job in security than what customers can do for themselves, largely because we have to deal with it on a daily basis, and it's far more secure than what the legacy applications could ever provide.
You're talking with the largest companies in the world, and what are their feelings at this point about moving to the cloud? Where are they willing to do it without any hesitation? Where do they have reservations or concerns or obstacles? What are you seeing as far as that large enterprise cloud transition in general?
I'm good friends with many of the CIOs of the Fortune 500 companies, and I've seen their perspective change pretty dramatically over the last 5 years. I think if it's a cross-industry application like CRM, like human capital management, like financials, IT, email, productivity applications, those are all largely becoming a cloud-first choice for most CIOs I talk to. If it's a industry-specific system like manufacturing or a patient care system, a billing system for utilities, I don't think the cloud has reached a place yet where we can take those into the cloud. Those are still being run on-premise. Maybe they're moving to a private cloud model. But everything that's cross-industry and not specific to a trading application, those are moving into the cloud pretty rapidly. And that's why you see the legacy competitors, after fighting the shift to the cloud, having to just embrace it because no one's buying those cross-industry applications on premise anymore.
So the cloud applications are essentially giving them a great deal of flexibility, and that's what they want. Plus, coupled with lower implementation costs and shorter upgrade cycles, essentially shorter upgrade cycles that are easier, less
Yes,
painful.
I think there are multiple reasons that the cloud is doing so well. Number one, if the business case didn't work for cloud, you wouldn't see the adoption you're seeing. It is a lower cost alternative. It is a lower cost alternative than traditional IT. So we save the customer money. That gets us in the door. We put them on a platform that allows them to innovate very rapidly. And we're in a world today that's a real-time, very fast-changing world. Legacy systems could not keep up with that. And you talk to any CIO of any Fortune 500, any Fortune 50 company, they are trying to keep up with the pace of change, and Workday allows them to do that. The other piece that is really an important element of why we've been successful is the embedded analytics, and we're taking that a step further, and I hope we'll get into more detail around that. But people want to analyze their data, they want to do it in real time, and they want to make better and faster decisions, and we enable them to do that. Those are the reasons why people are choosing us.
Okay, so the analytics point is an interesting and important one, and we hear analytics and data almost as buzzwords, but what are the practical implications of this for HR and finance?
You know, I'd say the first iteration of analytics and reporting in Workday was just to do a better job of business intelligence and do it within the system, so you didn't have to have a third-party business intelligence system with a different user interface, a different security model, and by the way, additional costs. So we first tackled the complexity of BI, built that into Workday. Now where we're going is taking advantage again of many of the technologies that have been born on the consumer internet around mass normalization of data, classification of data, and then complex machine learning algorithms against that data to make predictions about where business is going. So the first one that we came out with, Talent Insights, we now have over 50 customers who have subscribed to that application. It will predict which of your top performers might leave over the next 12 months based on a variety of inputs into the system. That takes a transactional system like HR, which is really important to get the transactions right, but it turns into a strategic system that helps customers make better decisions. It doesn't take decision making away from the customers, but it highlights areas where they might want to focus. We all care about keeping our top performers. If you knew that there was a top performer at risk, you'd want to do something about it. The predictive nature of where applications are headed allow that to happen, and it's a huge breakthrough. I think in 5 years, we won't be talking about transactions and analytics as two separate platforms or two separate areas of expertise. One system will do both, and that is the path that Workday is on. That our transactional system will also be your core analytics system, and beyond the predictive analytics we talked about, we're moving into planning and budgeting. That application comes out in the fall of this year, and that just adds another dimension where you can do everything you want in one unified system, and that's what our customers are asking us for.
And I know Workday has invested in data science. You've acquired technologies, and I know that you're investing a lot in this. And maybe talk a little bit about the kind of investments that you're making in this and other areas of innovation inside the company.
Sure. So we acquired a company a few years ago called Identified, and they had some technology, most of which we've now rewritten into the Workday platform. But more importantly, it was a group of brilliant data scientists that knew how to make sense of the large amounts of data we had and draw conclusions against that data by writing these machine learning algorithms. They've now been with us for 2 years. They've helped us create this new line of applications called Insight Applications. Some of those will be separate apps like Talent Insights. Some of those, like the credit collection Insight app, will actually be bundled into the product at no additional charge, but it makes that application smarter. The data sciences world is a very important investment for us. And it's very clear to us it's a very different skill set and mindset than traditional application development. I think the beauty of what we've done at Workday has been to marry the two. We can predict changes in revenue based on weather going forward. We can predict. We'll be able to predict people that might not be telling the truth on their expense reports based on looking at patterns. We'll see if customers want to buy that application. We then, as a complementary move, decided that we wanted to move into the world of budgeting and planning. And that's the world that had historically been led by companies like Hyperion, but those systems are legacy systems too. There are a handful of startups. We looked at those startups and thought we can do a better job because we already have all the data. We've got an in-memory database that allows us to do analytics in the same place we do transactions. What we were missing was a spreadsheet metaphor. So we acquired a company called Greylock, a brilliant group of developers in Colorado, sewed in their spreadsheet into the Workday platform, and in the fall you'll see budgeting and planning within Workday, where data is not going back and forth between a planning system and a transactional system. It's the same user interface. It's the same security model. It's the first time in the industry this has been done. It's only possible because of our in-memory database technology. And I do think it's something that's going to change the world of finance.
So link all of this then to this higher level theme of innovation, how you think of innovation, and also connect it to this very important theme that you raised earlier of customer satisfaction.
Well, innovation is core to who we are. I think a big part of what makes us unique is that we really do think like a consumer internet company. And if you see what's happening on the consumer internet over the last 15 years, there's just been an explosion of innovation. Whether it's first the consumer internet user interface, whether it was the scale out cloud architecture, the use of open source, the growing use of Hadoop as a core data management, data analysis platform, the emergence of mobile, all those things first happened on the consumer internet. So we pay very close attention to what's happening on the consumer internet. We'll see a new technology, and then we'll look at how we can solve an enterprise problem with that new technology. And that's really how we stay on top of the innovation curve. I think we're in a cycle of technology that's the most exciting I've ever seen. There's so many new technologies coming to market to manage transactions, to manage analytics, to lower the cost of computing. And we frankly look at it as a smorgasbord of options and pick the ones that work for Workday. And we have a laundry list of additional ones that we're going to add over the next few years to continue to make the system better and better for our customers. It's very important that we don't do technology for technology's sake. We have very, very close relationships with our customers. We have a CIO advisory board, a CHRO advisory board, a CFO advisory board. We show them these new technologies, these new capabilities, and they tell us which of those ones are important and which ones to invest in, and frankly, which ones may not be so important to them right now. So we really do listen to our customers very closely.
So when you are making your investment decisions in innovation, deciding what to prioritize, where to focus your resources, it's linked back very closely to what your customers are telling you.
I'd say 80 to 90% of what happens in any given update is driven by our customers. There are things like our big architectural changes or adding Hadoop where a customer might know that they need to ask for that. So as we're advancing the technology, those are the 10 to 20% of the investments we make based on our best view of technology. On a feature function basis for HR and financials, I can't think of any new feature function that hasn't been at the request of our customers. We actually have something called Brainstorm that allows our customers to actually vote on new features, and the ones that rise to the top get into the product. So it really is, it's almost like a constant pulsing of our customers to find out what's at the top of their priority list.
And if you also have Workday Labs, which is focused very specifically on what's coming down the road, new user interfaces and experience and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Again, taking a page out of the consumer internet, I know I sound like a broken record, but I do think that they are on top of innovation more than the typical enterprise company is these days. Google, Facebook, they have labs, like Facebook has labs where they try out new technologies. There's no reason why Workday shouldn't have labs. So we set up a lab. We'll test out things like Google Glass. We'll test out things like some of the new virtual reality technologies. That's where mobile first emerged from. We'll look at all these different technologies. Some make it to the into the product, some don't. But we are constantly experimenting, and we show what we're working on in the labs to our customers, and they give us a sense of whether that's a worthwhile project or not. And what that allows us to do is continue to innovate on more than just a evolutionary way, do revolutionary things on the side, and if it makes sense, bring that into the core product.
So again, it seems that everything that you're doing, and this has been a common thread as we've been talking, everything that you're doing is making reference back to what the customer wants, and you have dialogue with the customer. But I also know that every year you conduct a customer satisfaction, a very serious, large customer satisfaction survey. And so again, maybe talk about the relationship of customer satisfaction and this customer focus to your success with the business so far.
I think it's a trait that Dave and I brought from our previous company, or a focus that we brought in our previous company. Our reason for being is to have happy customers. And if you're a technology company or a services provider, that should be a reason for being. We're in business to make our customers successful. And we've really built that into the culture. We have annual goals, of which one of them is always having customer satisfaction above 95%. I'm pleased to say this past year was at 98%. And if we hit that goal, everyone in the company gets a reward that's a combination of a cash and stock reward. So it's not just the purview of customer services or sales or development. It's the purview of everyone in the company to make sure we have happy customers. That relationship with our customers has allowed us to move very quickly because they give us great feedback. We listen very closely. Frankly, it's also enabled us to grow rapidly. It's not just the right thing to do to have happy customers. It happens to also work for your business model. We have great salespeople, but I will tell you, our best salespeople are our customers. Many times we had a user conference in Europe, and we were asked to step out of the room, and some of our customers just basically grab the prospect and say, "You got to go with Workday." And I don't think you see that from our competitors. I think they probably shake them and say, "You get out of here as fast as you can." Our customers really like us. And we like them, and we want them to be successful. And they want other companies to be part of that ecosystem because they know the more successful we are, the more we can invest in products. And there's nothing more valuable and more important to us than having happy customers, with the one exception of having happy employees, because happy employees get us happy customers.
Now, what about the role of this in creating trust with customers? Because I know that when you started the company with Dave Duffield, one of the reasons you were able to get such great initial customers was because they trusted you and they trusted Dave. And you were obviously the founders and therefore the reflection of the company as a whole.
Well, it's a huge part of having happy customers. You have to be transparent and honest with them. A great story along those lines is HP. We talked to HP for about 2 years before they chose us. And Dave told them early on, "Look, we're not ready for you. As much as we like to have you as a customer, we're not ready for your skill. We're not ready for the functionality requirements you had." When we were ready, we went back to them. I went back to them. I sat down with Meg and said, "We're ready. We can do this." And we've had a phenomenal relationship with HP. They're one of our big partners now. They've actually launched a services organization off of the successful implementation of Workday at HP. If you want to have happy customers, you have to be honest, even when it's not the easy thing to do. You have to be transparent. You see what we do with our data centers. We have a trust center now that this really shows everything that we're doing with respect to data centers. There's no opaqueness about where people are in production, where our sandboxes are. We're all out there. That way, when there is an issue, we can look each other in the eye and say, so here's the issue. We both see the issue. How do we solve this issue?
So you say happy employees are the foundation of good customer relationships. And it's very easy to talk about happy employees as kind of this relatively meaningless, abstract ideal. But in your case, you invest personal time, effort into the culture of Workday. And so would you share with us some of the investments, not just in terms of money, but it could be that time, focus, energy, whatever it is, into building the kind of culture that creates these attributes of trust and desire to please the customer that leads to the levels of customer satisfaction you were describing?
Well, first and foremost, Dave and I interviewed the first 500 people who joined Workday. And we were not interviewing them for their skill set in marketing or engineering or in sales. We assumed our teams got that part right. We were interviewing them specifically for cultural fit. And our belief was if we got the first 500 right, they'd get the next 5,000 right. And that really has played out that way. During that interview cycle, what we look for people that used we versus I. You know, we try to filter out the I's. We're looking for the we's. We do work as a team, and that is a huge part of why we've been successful. We run fast as a team. We look for people with success, with focus on integrity, but we also look for people that have tended to stay at their companies for long periods of time. Some might think that that's not great, but for us, we're trying to avoid the job hoppers, and there are some in Silicon Valley that go from hot company to hot company. That doesn't really work in our model. We invest very heavily in employees, and we get the return, and the employee gets the return if they stay with us for a while. So we really focus on people that will commit to us for the long run. And then we tell them, you're going to have a great time working here. Live by our value system. Take care of customers. Be nice to your fellow employees. Have fun. If you're not having fun, go to one of our competitors because if you're not having fun, you probably shouldn't be at Workday. In the other way that it translates, we have very fun company meetings. I'll be launching soon a series of town hall meetings because as we get bigger, it's harder to keep on top of all the new employees and culture and what's changing, and so we've got to get ahead of that. We have a great HR department, or a people organization led by Ashley Goldsmith that really focuses on rewarding and taking care of employees and making sure they feel like they're part of a big family. Performance oriented as well, though. So there's a lot of things that go into it. But part of it is just the tone that you strike. Dave and I sit in cubes. We sit. My cube is no different than other people's cubes. Mine might be a little bit messier at times. But we sit in the middle of the cubes and we're very accessible. And I think that just creates a culture of being accessible and a culture of being open and friendly.
How do you, so you started the company and you and Dave, your co-founder, Dave Duffield, personally interviewed the first 500 employees looking for the right cultural fit. So now the company grew to 500 people. Now, obviously, it's much larger. How do you prevent the culture from kind of stultifying into bureaucracy? How do you prevent that from happening?
That is a great question. It is a great question. There are a couple things. Number one, the people that are the cultural leaders in the organization have to continue to drive our culture. If they see someone come in that's not a cultural fit, we've got to figure out how to part ways with that individual if we can't get them to embrace the culture. We've got to stay organized in small teams. What made us successful in the early days of Workday were small teams. We'd all sit around the table and make decisions. When you get big, there's a tendency to have big organizations and get caught up in so much process and bureaucracy. And candidly, we probably have some of that, and we continue to strive to drive it out. The best way to do that is to have small teams of people who are empowered to make decisions and get their work done. And anytime I see an organization, in terms of a decision-making organization that's more than 15, 20 people, I get worried. So you want to just keep driving towards small teams and make sure that those teams embrace the culture.
So that means, so you've got these small teams, and that means there needs to be a very clear sense of guidance and cohesion for these small teams to be properly coordinated, both in terms of their relationship to the broader whole, getting the work done, but also in terms of the cultural values. And so how do you ensure that the glue remains in and among these many small teams?
You're absolutely right. That is what we need to do, and I count and we count very much on our leaders and our managers to be very hands-on in knowing what's going on in their organizations. You can give people guidance, but you need to make sure that they have all the tools they need to be successful, that have all the information they need to be successful, that the group is organized and works as a cohesive unit. And so we put a lot of emphasis on our management style and philosophy. We can't have managers and leaders that are just frankly overhead. They have to be able to do the jobs too and be hands-on enough where they can help drive the organization forward.
And how about you? I mean, how do you find the time to do this, given you're the CEO of a very rapidly growing public company that counts some of the largest organizations in the world as your customers? You are responsible to your customers in a very intense way. So what's your involvement in this, and how do you find the time to do it?
It's a great question. I try to divide up my time a third, and then plus 10%. That adds up to 110%. I haven't figured out how to make it work better. A third on employees, a third on products and strategy, a third with customers, and then the 10% is with investors. And when we go through some of the more volatile times in the market, that time probably pops up. Over time, I would like to stick to that model. As we become more global, and even in California, we're spread out. I frankly am working harder to be better on the employee front to get out to all the different offices. So if myself or Dave or one of the senior management team members is traveling to a region for a sales call or customer visit, we really try to add a town hall meeting to that, so that we can meet a bunch of people, make sure they feel good about the company, answer any questions they have. My next one is going to be in Australia sometime in April. So anytime I'm out on the road, I'm trying to visit an office and do a town hall, as well as meet with customers and prospects. But it is, I think of that as my number one job in the next few years, is to ensure this culture remains special and unique and attracts the best and brightest and keeps the best and brightest we have here. That will keep us on the cutting edge of innovation. That will allow us to maintain high levels of customer satisfaction, and all the other metrics like financial metrics, they all come from having great employees, innovating, and having happy customers. All the rest follow from those three things, and so that's my job.
That's pretty extraordinary, because you're CEO of a technology company, and we're spending all of this time talking about culture. And so the equation then, or the path, as I understand, as you've been describing it is the culture and hiring the right employees together that creates ultimately the customer success and the relationships with customers, and customer satisfaction is the driver ultimately of revenue for Workday. And so therefore you're making this linkage between your investment in the culture and then the people, and ultimately in the performance of Workday as a company.
Absolutely. That's where I spend my time today. I love spending time on products, but we have such an amazing products team, amazing technology team, people like Petros and David Clark, people like Lynn Christensen and Leanne and Dan Beck, Mike Franson, Joe Korngable. I mean, I keep going down the list. We just have an amazing group of folks running our products and technology. Betsy Bland is really driving financials now. My job is just to make sure that they have the ability and wherewithal to continue to innovate and lead their organizations and I need to remove obstacles and make sure they have the right development resources to continue to invest. And every now and then I might tweak things here or there, but we're on the right path, and I just need to make sure nothing gets in their way. So that has changed since the early days of the company, where I was much more involved with the day-to-day products. Stan has been with me from the start. He's still very involved in setting technology strategy. So when you have such great talent on the team, you don't really have to, and I don't really have to worry about leaning in on the product side, even though I am probably most comfortable in the products area.
It is pretty amazing, the impact of the culture on the customer satisfaction and the revenue. But let's shift gears here for a moment and talk about your customers and talk about CIOs. So first off, who do you sell to? Are you selling to the line of business? Are you selling to the CIO? Who is your customer, so to speak?
Our customer is usually both the line of business and the CIO. The line of business from a functionality perspective, can we solve their business needs? Does our product check the boxes on their business processes, on their workflows, on the reports, on the analytics they need to do? And then the CIO is really important in evaluating our technology. We're very proud of our technology. I think it's the thing that differentiates us most versus our legacy competitors. It's a modern, object-oriented, in-memory database technology that lets us do incredible things. The CIO is very involved for us as a facilitator of the business making the right decision for them. Ultimately, they will be very involved in the project management, and then they will be involved in two other aspects: managing the integrations to the other systems that are within their organization, and over time, making sure that we stay on top of all the right SLAs and other business items as we build this long-term relationship. So the CIO's job has changed pretty dramatically in the last 10 to 15 years. I would think that today's job as CIO is a lot more interesting, but also more complex than it was 15 years ago.
It's I mean, these days the core, it seems, of the CIO job is supporting business functions in terms of business outcomes, as opposed to, and I put this in quotes, merely or just infrastructure. I mean, infrastructure in and of itself is a huge job. But you say that you sell to both, and that's in contrast to some other software companies, or many other software companies, who say, well, we sell primarily to the line of business, or we sell primarily to the CIO, and their comfort level is with one or the other, rather than as a uniting force, in a sense, trying to bring the two of them together. So maybe comment on that a little bit.
Sure. So I think as a system of record vendor for HR and financials, we're going to go through the CIO's office. They own those large ERP implementations that we'd like to replace and put them into the cloud. So we don't sell a departmental solution. We're not going to sell for 15 to 20 people. When we sell an HR system, it's a full-on replacement of their legacy HR system. When we sell the financial system, it's a full-on replacement of their legacy accounting system. And the CIO is very involved in those enterprise-wide decisions. I'd say early on we learned that the line of business always falls in love with Workday. It's a modern user experience. It's got a modern take on functionality, built-in analytics, all the things that HR is looking for. But if we didn't win over the CIO, it didn't really matter. And so along the way, we realized we really need to embrace the CIO. And frankly, when the CIO is driving the shift to the cloud, both the sales cycle we experience, and more importantly, the deployment cycle we experience, is just phenomenal. It's just amazing when the CIO gets on board and actually is the leader. So I think of people like Dave Smoley, first at Flextronics, then at AstraZeneca. or Jay Moran, first at Thomson Reuters, then at Unilever. They led the organizations down the Workday path. The HR organizations were happy to go down that path, but when the CIO gets behind it, it really is very powerful. And when you wonder, what does the I stand for in CIO now? Maybe it's innovation. Maybe that's the right way to think about it. The Chief Innovation Officer, bringing innovation into their organization, either through internal development, which was the historical model, or through managing a series of partnerships with vendors like Amazon and Workday and Salesforce and Microsoft. That's the way they drive innovation to organization. And then they have a smaller team building custom apps for areas that are not covered by those large vendors. And so I think the Chief Information Officer is now the Chief Innovation Officer, and it's pretty exciting. I think it's a pretty exciting job these days. But you know the CIOs better than I do. It's just a fast-moving, fascinating world, and I think that technology now is the core of so many companies' business. It's not something on the side anymore. It's actually core to what they do. So the CIO, I think, has taken a role in the front office as opposed to historically just being a back office organization.
That's really interesting. So, in effect, the message of what you have observed is that when the CIO is working closely or in lockstep with the business and there's strong lines of communication, then the entire process, the innovation process, moves forward at a much more rapid and I'm sure more responsive, rapid rate and more responsive to what the business ultimately needs as well.
We pride ourselves on customer success. We can make it work when the line of business doesn't work so well with IT within a company, but it's so much better when they work together. The best implementations, the most efficient deployments, the happiest customers are when the line of business and the CIO's office are lined up. It's fun to watch. It's fun to watch the transformation that happens as they see what is possible with Workday and new platforms. The most recent example of a big go live there was Bank of America, and that was a partnership between their CIO, their Chief Administrative Officer, their CHRO, even their CEO got involved at the end and likes using the Workday application. But to see the whole team engage, it was a phenomenal project. This is one of the biggest companies in the world. They went live on Workday in 13 months. They ran a phenomenal team, and that's because of the partnership they had internal to B of A, as well as the partnership they had with Workday.
Aneel, we have only a few minutes left. I have a whole lot of questions and things I want to talk with you about. So let me ask you a few questions and give me back quick answers if you don't mind, because there are things I just want to pick your brain on, but we're just about out of time. So finally, on this point about the CIO, what advice do you have, or what thoughts do you have on the CIO working in collaboration with the business? How can they make that relationship most successful based on your observations of what works?
I think so much of what works within these organizations is just listening. When the business feels like they're listened to by IT and vice versa, the relationship is much better. There's a much better understanding of each other's needs. So listening is just a key part of it. And then for IT to be or the CIO to be the eyes and ears for the business on the new technologies and how those new technologies solve problems, because business has a problem. They don't know how to choose the different solutions, whether is this a Hadoop problem, is this a cloud problem? IT can really be at the forefront of picking out the technologies to solve those problems.
Okay, another quick question. You were at one point an important VC, venture capitalist investor in the industry. Now you're focused on operating Workday as the CEO of Workday. But of course, you're still seeing interesting technologies, enterprise technologies coming down the pike. Just very briefly, what's interesting out there? What kind of technologies are you finding fascinating?
I think where we are today, a lot of the cool stuff is happening within analytics. A lot of stuff is happening in terms of applications being built on top of Hadoop, new data technologies like Cassandra. I think we're basically seeing the slow disappearance of the relational database. It's in place for the legacy apps, but new apps are taking advantage of new technologies that are not relational databases, and there's just an explosion of innovation happening there. I think there's some very cool stuff happening on the productivity front, both led by incumbents like Microsoft and Google, but Box and Dropbox are doing really neat things. I'm a big fan of Slack, big fan of Chatter around collaboration. So I think Slack is one of those new emerging technologies that we use it to manage our senior management team. So I think there are a lot of cool technologies around collaboration, around data sciences, and that feels like that's the next frontier.
Let's talk about disruption. There are so many industries these days that are being disrupted by smaller companies, by startups, by new technologies, where it's forcing the company to confront a business model shift. For an established company, this is very hard. So do you have any advice, 3 or 4 points of advice maybe, for established companies that are facing these business model changes and disruptions, and at the same time, they can't just give up their existing business, so they have to operate the new business model and move there, evolve there, while operating and maintaining their existing business and existing customers and products. Any advice for folks who are trying to juggle this?
Well, so I would take it from the perspective of non-tech companies. I talk to CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. They all worry about some company in Silicon Valley disintermediating them in some way. And that doesn't have to happen, but they have to embrace these new technologies, at least for part of their business. So I encourage them to come out to Silicon Valley, come out and meet the startups that have these new technologies and see how you can partner with them. And so what we're seeing more and more are the CIOs, really, and this is really led by CIOs, coming out to the Valley, meeting all the technology companies that are the disruptors and seeing if they can work together or actually leverage some of those technologies. If you're an incumbent in the technology industry, I think it's a tougher road to hoe. As one very close advisor who was the CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the world said, you're either on the right side or wrong side of the angels. And if you're on the wrong side of tech, you got to find a way to get on the right side of tech. And the right side of tech is cloud, true cloud, not fake cloud. It's open source. It's scale out commodity computing. I mean, you name it. It's big data. There's a whole wave of these new trends happening. And if you're an old tech company, you got to figure out how to get on top of those, even if it means leaving some of your old business behind, because that old business will disappear. And as large tech companies don't disappear, they just become less relevant over time. And I think some of the large companies like IBM and Microsoft are doing a good job, and HP are doing a good job trying to reinvent themselves. And frankly, others aren't.
And finally, you mentioned that this is an opportunity for CIOs to take a leadership role in helping drive the innovation that is related to transforming business models based on technology and platforms.
I think it's an opportunity of a lifetime. And as I talk to the CEOs of these Fortune 500 companies, the person inevitably they talk to about trying to find out what's going on the technology front is the CIO, which is one of the reasons why I think it's such a cool time to be a CIO.
All right. Well, I am sure that the CIOs who are listening appreciate that. We have been talking with Aneel Bhusri, who is the CEO and the co-founder of Workday, on episode number 160 of CXOTalk. Aneel, thank you for spending so much time today and for a very insightful conversation.
Thank you so much, Michael, and I hope to see you soon in person.
I hope so. And we have a special show coming up on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, with the API architect of the New York Times, who is going to tell us about how APIs connect to the core mission of the New York Times. So join us next Tuesday, and then join us next Friday again for our regularly scheduled show. Everybody, thank you for watching. Thank you to Aneel Bhusri. Thank you for Workday for making it all happen. And have a great weekend, everybody.